The xenorchaeology lab hummed with the gentle whir of quantum processors as Dr. Sarah Chen squinted at her holoscreen. Ancient alien texts floated before her, their symbols shifting between 17 different species writing systems. After 3 years of analyzing ceremonial texts from distant worlds, she developed an eye for patterns. But this one was different. "Neural networks stuck again," she muttered, tapping the correction algorithm. The AI insisted on translating a particular glyph as purpose across all 17 languages, but the contextual markers didn't fit. She'd seen this hiccup before, always around similar concepts, always across multiple species. The lab door whispered open as her colleague, Dr. Marcus Wright, walked in carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee, still obsessing over the Regelian temple inscriptions. He set 1 cup beside her workstation. Sarah accepted the coffee without looking up. "It's not just Regelian anymore. I found the same pattern in Centaurian, Proximan, and even those fragments from the Orion ruins." She gestured at the floating texts. "Look at this symbol cluster. Every species has a word for how things happen, but when they try to express why things happen, there's this linguistic void." Marcus leaned closer, his weathered face illuminated by the holoscreen's glow. "Could be a translation artifact. Different species, different cognitive frameworks." "That's what I thought at first." Sarah pulled up a neural mapping comparison. "But I've cross-referenced with modern languages from all these species. The pattern holds. They can describe processes, mechanisms, even complex theoretical physics. But when it comes to questioning the fundamental nature of reality itself, nothing." "Come on, Sarah. Every spacefaring race has philosophers." "Do they?" She switched to another dataset. "I've analyzed thousands of texts. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the less they seem to ask certain questions. It's like they hit a wall in their curiosity. Except humans," Marcus finished, beginning to look troubled. "Exactly." Sarah pulled up an analysis of human philosophical texts spanning 3,000 years. "We never stopped asking why. Even after we achieved FTL travel, even after we joined the Galactic Council. We keep pushing, keep questioning. And we're the only ones." Marcus set down his coffee. "If you're right, this could be huge. But you'll need more than pattern recognition to convince the Council." Sarah smiled for the first time that day. "Already ahead of you." She brought up a new window showing brain scans. "I've been working with Dr. Patil in xenoneurology. We found something strange in the neural architecture of every advanced species we studied. A kind of blank spot. A section of their brains that should be active during abstract reasoning, but just isn't. And humans don't have this blank spot. Not only that, we're the only species whose brains light up like a supernova when confronting existential questions. It's like we're wired differently. Or maybe everyone else is wired the same," Marcus said slowly, "and we're the anomaly." The implications hung in the air between them. Sarah turned to face her colleague fully. "I'm presenting these findings to the Council next week. This goes beyond archaeology, beyond linguistics. Something fundamental is happening to intelligent species as they advance, something that affects their very ability to question reality. And somehow, humanity slipped through the cracks." Marcus ran a hand through his gray hair. "The Council won't like this. You're suggesting that every advanced species in the galaxy has been, what? Programmed. Limited. I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm just presenting the data." Sarah turned back to her holoscreen, but her hands were trembling slightly. "But whatever this is, we need to understand it. Because either humanity is unique in the galaxy, or something made everyone else stop asking questions," Marcus finished quietly. Sarah nodded, still staring at the ancient texts floating before her. "And I can't help wondering, what were they about to discover that made them stop looking?" The quantum processors continued their quiet hum as the 2 scientists contemplated the weight of what they found. Outside the lab's windows, the lights of other research facilities dotted the lunar landscape, each one filled with humans asking questions that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten how to ask. The Galactic Council chamber stretched upward in impossible geometric patterns, its crystalline walls designed to accommodate delegates from 17 spacefaring civilizations. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the presentation podium, uncomfortably aware that she was the only human in the vast space. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My research has uncovered a pattern that spans all known civilizations, one that suggests a fundamental alteration in how species process information after achieving faster-than-light travel." The holographic data materialized around her, showing neural mapping comparisons across species. The Arcturian representative, a towering figure of shifting crystalline formations, leaned forward with an audible chime of interest. "As you can see, there's a consistent neural pattern, Fat." Sarah stopped mid-sentence as murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Rigelian delegation had risen to their feet, their characteristic bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. "This line of inquiry is wasteful," the Rigelian speaker declared, their translator rendering their clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "The Council's time should not be spent on linguistic curiosities that have no practical application." Sarah frowned. The Rigelians were known for their pragmatism, but this level of dismissal was unprecedented. "With respect, Ambassador, this goes beyond linguistics. The data suggests systematic changes in cognitive function." "We have reviewed your preliminary findings," interrupted the Proximan delegate, their methane-based form swirling with unusual intensity. "They are incomplete and speculative. The Council recommends you redirect your research toward more productive areas." The hostility in the chamber was palpable now. Sarah had expected skepticism, even criticism, but this felt different, personal, as if the very act of asking these questions was somehow offensive. "If you'll examine the neural scans," she persisted, highlighting specific sections of the data, "you'll notice that every species shows identical patterns of neural inhibition around certain types of abstract questioning. The statistical probability of this occurring naturally." A sharp tone cut through the chamber. The High Speaker, a Centaurian elder, raised their primary appendage. "This session is concluded. The Council thanks Dr. Chen for her creative interpretation of the data." Sarah stood frozen at the podium as the chamber began to empty, delegates filing out with unusual haste. Only the Arcturian representative remained, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as concern. As the last delegates departed, the Arcturian glided toward her. "Dr. Chen." Their harmonic voice resonated directly in her mind. "Your research is more significant than you realize. And more dangerous." Sarah began gathering her data chips with shaking hands. "I don't understand. The evidence is clear. Why would they refuse to even consider it?" "Because they cannot." The Arcturian's voice carried an undertone she'd never heard before. "Fear. Meet me in 6 hours at coordinates I am transmitting now. Come alone. There is something you must see." Before she could respond, the Arcturian had glided away, leaving Sarah alone in the vast chamber. She slumped against the podium, trying to process what had happened. Years of research, months of preparation, all dismissed in minutes. Her communicator chirped, a message from Marcus back at the lab. "Emergency. Equipment malfunction. All data corrupted. Backups gone. Get back here now." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. The Council's hostile reaction, the Arcturian's warning, and now this. It all pointed to something bigger than she'd imagined. Something that powerful entities wanted to keep hidden. As she hurried from the chamber, she caught her reflection in the crystalline walls. The same walls that had witnessed countless species present countless discoveries over millennia of cooperation. But how many other researchers had stood where she stood, seeing patterns they weren't supposed to see? And what had happened to them? 6 hours. She checked the coordinates again. A maintenance sector on the station's outer ring. Either she was walking into a trap, or she was about to learn why the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were afraid of a simple question. Why? The Europa research facility was buried 2 kilometers beneath the moon's icy surface. Sarah stared through the reinforced viewport at the dark ocean beyond, trying to process what her team had discovered in the 3 months since her disastrous council presentation. The neural patterns are identical, Dr. Patil announced, bringing up another set of holographic brain scans. Every single species shows the same modification in their cognitive architecture. It's like finding the same signature written in 17 different hands. Sarah turned from the viewport to examine the data. The facility's quantum mainframe had been running analyses for weeks, comparing neural patterns across species. The results were impossible to ignore, and impossible to explain through natural evolution. "Show me the temporal comparison again," she requested. The holographic display shifted, showing brain development across different species' technological advancement. There, every time. The change occurs within a generation of achieving FTL travel. Marcus, who'd been unusually quiet, spoke up from his workstation. "We've confirmed it isn't related to FTL radiation exposure. Whatever causes this, it's targeted and precise. Almost like an activation switch," Sarah finished. "Something lying dormant in their neural architecture, waiting for a specific trigger." The room fell silent except for the distant rumble of Europa's subsurface currents. They'd chosen this facility for its isolation after the destruction of their lab data, working in secret with a small team of trusted colleagues. The Arcturian ambassador's warning had proven prescient. Someone was very interested in stopping their research. "Dr. Chen," called out Dr. Rivera, their youngest team member, "you need to see this. I've been running quantum resonance scans on tissue samples from pre-FTL and post-FTL specimens of the same species." The team gathered around Rivera's station. The holographic display showed molecular structures rotating slowly in the air. "The changes aren't just neural," Rivera explained, highlighting specific sections. "There are quantum-level modifications to the brain tissue itself. It's like someone rewrote the fundamental properties of their consciousness." "That's impossible," Marcus protested. "You can't just rewrite quantum states in living tissue without killing the subject." "Apparently, you can," Sarah said quietly, "and someone has been doing it to every spacefaring race except humans." Dr. Patel pulled up another dataset. "The human samples show something interesting. Our quantum states are naturally chaotic, unpredictable. Every other species shows increasing quantum coherence as they advance. It's why we had such trouble developing FTL travel. We were trying to follow their methods, but our brains work fundamentally differently. We stumbled onto FTL by accident," Sarah mused. "A messy, imperfect solution that shouldn't have worked. But it did, because we weren't following the prescribed path. We slipped through whatever net is catching other species." A warning light flashed on the main console. Dr. Rivera checked the readings and frowned. "We're picking up quantum fluctuations in the facility's containment field, similar to last week's anomaly." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with Europa's frozen surface. They'd been experiencing increasingly strange phenomena. Equipment malfunctions, data corruption, and inexplicable quantum readings that defied known physics. "It's like reality itself is pushing back against our investigation," Marcus said, voicing what they'd all been thinking. Sarah made a decision. Upload everything to the quantum encrypted servers. Multiple copies, different locations. Someone went to great lengths to erase our previous data. They won't get another chance. As her team worked, Sarah returned to the viewport. Somewhere above Europa's icy crust, beyond Jupiter's imposing bulk, lay the answers they sought. Who or what had been systematically altering intelligent species? Why did they want to prevent certain kinds of questions? And most importantly, what would happen when humanity, with its unique neural architecture, finally discovered the truth? The quantum fluctuation alarm sounded again, louder this time. Sarah watched as strange patterns rippled across the dark Europan ocean beyond the viewport. Whatever force had been manipulating galactic civilization for eons, it knew they were getting close, and it was responding. "Backup complete," announced Rivera. "What now?" Sarah turned from the viewport, her expression determined. "Now we follow this wherever it leads. Because we're the only ones who still can." The abandoned research station hung in the quantum anomalies penumbra like a dead satellite, its hull scarred by decades of radiation. Sarah's team had tracked the station's coordinates from fragments of data scattered across 17 different species archives, each piece meaningless alone but forming a pattern when combined. "Life support's functional," Marcus reported from the shuttle's control panel. "Minimal power signature, but the station's cores are still active." "That's impossible," Dr. Rivera said, checking the readings. "This station was abandoned 60 years ago. No power system could maintain itself that long without maintenance." Sarah stared through the viewport at the derelict structure. "Unless it was meant to keep running. Unless it's waiting for something." Their shuttle docked with a shudder that rattled the hull. The station's automated systems engaged with surprising smoothness, considering their age. As the team suited up in their protective gear, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Remember," she warned as they prepared to board, "we're looking for anything related to FTL development or neural modification." This station was operational when the Proximans achieved faster-than-light travel. The timing can't be coincidental. The airlock cycled, and they entered the station. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow, creating shadows that seemed to move when viewed directly. Their boots magnetically engaged with the deck, compensating for the station's failing artificial gravity. "Central Research Lab should be 2 levels up," Dr. Paddle said, consulting the station's schematics they'd reconstructed. "If there are answers, they'll be there." As they moved through the corridors, Sarah noticed something odd about the station's design. These aren't standard configurations for any known species. The ergonomics are wrong. "Because it wasn't built by any known species," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "Look at these markings. They predate every civilization in the Council. They reached the central lab, its doors sealed by 60 years of disuse. It took their combined efforts to force them open, revealing a vast circular chamber dominated by a device none of them recognized." "What is that?" Rivera whispered, approaching the machine. It resembled a spherical cage of crystalline filaments, each strand humming with faint luminescence. Sarah's hand trembled as she activated her scanner. "The quantum readings are off the scale. This thing it's entangled with something. Something massive." Suddenly, Rivera stumbled, clutching his head. "The dreams," he gasped. "I'm seeing them while I'm awake now." They'd all been experiencing the dreams since starting their research. Impossible memories of events they couldn't have witnessed, civilizations they'd never seen, knowledge they couldn't possibly possess. Sarah had dismissed them as stress-induced hallucinations, but here, in this ancient chamber, they felt more real than ever. "It's not just dreams," she realized, watching the crystalline filaments pulse in sync with Rivera's movements. "They're bleeding through. Memories stored in the quantum fabric of space-time itself." Marcus had found a control panel, its surface responding to his touch despite its age. "Sarah, look at this. It's a record of every species' first FTL flight. But the data, it's being actively updated. This station is still monitoring galactic civilization." "Not monitoring," Sarah corrected, understanding flooding her mind as fragments of impossible memories clicked into place. "Directing. This is where it happens. This is where they change." The chamber's lights flickered as the spherical device pulsed stronger. Images flooded their minds. Civilizations rising and reaching for the stars, each one approaching a threshold of understanding, and each one being subtly redirected, their neural patterns adjusted to prevent them from seeing something. Something massive. Something terrifying. "We need to leave," Patil urged, backing toward the door. "Whatever this place is, we're not supposed to be here." But Sarah stood transfixed by the device, watching the crystalline strands dance. Humanity had achieved FTL travel through an imperfect method, a chaotic solution that bypassed this station's protocols. They'd slipped through the net, and now they were seeing what every other species had been programmed to ignore. "No," she said firmly. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be, because we're the first ones who can handle what comes next." The station's quantum core surged, and reality began to bend around them. The first attack came without warning. The quantum pulse ripped through the station's hull like a solar flare, missing their shuttle by meters. Sarah and her team raced through the deteriorating corridors as reality itself seemed to convulse around them. Multiple bogies materializing. Marcus shouted through the comlink. They're not ships. I don't know what they are." Through the viewport, Sarah saw them. Geometric shapes that hurt her eyes to look at, folding through dimensions that shouldn't exist. They moved with purpose, surrounding the station with impossible precision. "Get to the shuttle," she ordered, helping Dr. Rivera, who was still reeling from the quantum feedback. "Paddle, secure the data core." They'd managed to download terabytes of information from the station's ancient systems before the attack began. Now those same systems were turning against them, automated defense protocols awakening after millennia of dormancy. The station's corridors twisted, spatial geometry warping as the defense systems engage. What had been a straight path to the airlock now curved in nauseating spirals. Dr. Patel stumbled. The data core clutched to his chest. "The structure's trying to isolate us," he gasped. "It's rewriting its own architecture." Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "It's not the structure. Look." Through a rent in the station's hull, they could see the quantum anomaly pulsing with new intensity. The geometric entities circling the station weren't attacking. They were responding to something bigger. "The universe itself," Marcus breathed, understanding dawning in his voice. "The defense systems aren't in the station. They're part of reality's fundamental structure." Another blast rocked the station. Rivera screamed as a section of corridor ahead of them simply ceased to exist, leaving them facing a void that shouldn't be possible. Sarah's mind raced, processing everything they'd learned. "The quantum patterns," she said suddenly. "They're not random. Everyone, link hands." Her team complied without question, forming a human chain. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the crystalline patterns they'd observed in the central chamber. Human brains were quantum chaos engines, unpredictable by design. But if they synchronized their chaos, the void ahead of them flickered, reality reasserting itself just long enough for them to rush through. They reached the airlock as another section of the station disappeared, erased by forces beyond comprehension. "Manual override on the shuttle dock," Marcus shouted, wrestling with controls that no longer obeyed physical laws. "The automation's gone insane." Sarah pressed her hand against the control panel, focusing on the quantum chaos in her own consciousness. The system resisted, then yielded, recognizing something it couldn't categorize or control. The airlock cycled. They burst into the shuttle just as the station began to fold in on itself. Marcus threw himself into the pilot's seat, disengaging docking clamps as reality distorted around them. The geometric entities converge, their forms blurring into patterns that made Sarah's vision swim. "They're not trying to kill us," she realized, watching the entities' movements. "They're trying to make us forget, just like they made every other species forget. But they can't process human consciousness." The shuttle's engines roared to life. Behind them, the ancient station collapsed into quantum foam, taking its secrets with it. But not all of them. The data core in Patel's arms hummed with stolen knowledge. As they accelerated away from the anomaly, the geometric entities made one final attempt to stop them. Space itself bent around their shuttle, trying to guide them into patterns of thought and movement that would lead them away from the truth. But human minds couldn't be guided so easily. "Plot a course for Europa," Sarah ordered, watching the entities fall behind as the shuttle's FTL drive spooled up. "The chaotic route. The stars blurred around them as they jumped, taking their impossible discoveries with them. In the shuttle's hold, the data core pulsed with information that no species was meant to possess, information about why the universe itself wanted some questions to remain unasked. Sarah looked at her team, seeing the same determination in their eyes. Whatever force had been maintaining this cosmic censorship for eons had never encountered human consciousness before. Now it had. And humans had never been good at accepting locked doors. Back in the Europa facility, Dr. Rivera stared at the holographic display with bloodshot eyes. The quantum data they'd stolen from the station had taken weeks to decode, and what they were seeing defied comprehension. "It's code," he said, watching patterns ripple across the projection. "But not like any programming language we've seen. It's written into the quantum fabric of space-time itself." Sarah studied the cascading symbols, her mind struggling to process their implications. Since their escape from the station, reality around their facility had become increasingly unstable. Equipment would spontaneously reconfigure itself. Corridors would temporarily lead to impossible spaces, and their dreams had become shared experiences of events that never happened. "Look at this sequence," Dr. Petal pointed to a recurring pattern. "It appears in everything. Physical constants, fundamental forces, even the structure of consciousness itself. It's like reality is running on an operating system," Marcus finished. He'd barely slept since their return, driven by the same fevered curiosity that gripped them all. And whatever we found at that station, it was designed to maintain that system. A tremor shook the facility, causing the holographic display to flutter. Through the viewport, they could see quantum distortions rippling across Europa's subsurface ocean, like reality itself was developing glitches. "We're causing this," Sarah realized. "Our investigation is creating inconsistencies in the program. The more we understand, the more unstable it becomes." Dr. Rivera brought up another dataset. The neural modifications in other species, they're not just censorship. They're patches designed to prevent conscious observation of these quantum patterns. By seeing them, we're changing them. "The observer effect on a cosmic scale," Marcus muttered. "But why? What's so dangerous about asking these questions?" Before anyone could respond, all their displays simultaneously flickered to life, showing the same message in 17 different alien languages. Runhying ERROR. Conscious NESFORKDTTTD. Initiating emergency protocols. The quantum distortions in Europa's ocean intensified, forming impossible geometries that hurt to look at. Sarah felt reality trying to rewrite itself around them, but their human minds refused to accept the corrections. "It's trying to debug us," she said, watching the patterns spread. "Like we're an error in the program that needs to be fixed. But our consciousness doesn't follow its rules. We're like a virus in the system." Dr. Patel was frantically analyzing new data streams. These patterns, they're not just code, they're more like memories. The original memories of the universe, before it was programmed to forget something. The facility's systems were chaos now, reality bleeding through from other possibilities, other versions of existence that shouldn't have been accessible. Through it all, their human minds remained anchored in their own chaotic quantum states, immune to the universal program's attempts to rewrite them. There, Sarah pointed to a sequence that remained stable despite the chaos. "That's not part of the program. That's a message, hidden in the quantum noise, something left behind by whoever wrote this code." As they focused on the sequence, their shared impossible memories aligned. They saw it then. The truth that the universe itself had been programmed to hide. The reason why reality needed an operating system in the first place. The facility shuddered as multiple realities tried to occupy the same space. Equipment transformed into impossible objects, following laws of physics that had been overwritten eons ago. But the message remained clear, burned into their minds by consciousness that refused to be limited by programmed restrictions. "We have a choice," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We can stop now, let the system repair itself. Everything will go back to normal. and we'll be neural modified like every other species. Or, Marcus asked, though they all knew the answer, or we push through, break the last firewall, see what the universe is hiding. She looked at each of them. But we have to decide now, before reality finishes debugging itself. Through the viewport, Europa's ocean had become a fractal pattern of quantum possibilities, each one representing a different version of existence. The universe's operating system was failing, unable to process the anomaly of human consciousness. And in the quantum noise, that hidden message pulsed like a warning, or an invitation. The Europa facility had become a nexus of quantum instability, reality fracturing around them like broken glass. Through the viewport, they could see multiple versions of the moon's subsurface ocean simultaneously existing in the same space, each one following different laws of physics. The final firewall is failing, Dr. Patil announced, his voice tight with tension. We're seeing data fragments from before the universal operating system was installed, before reality was programmed to make sense. Sarah watched as mathematical constants shifted in real time, gravity wavering as fundamental forces rewrote themselves. Their human minds, operating on principles of quantum chaos, remained immune to the changes that would have driven any other species to madness. Look at this, Rivera called out, pointing to a stream of data that remained constant despite the fluctuations. It's like an original memory from before. The message they'd discovered pulsed with increasing urgency, a quantum signature that felt ancient beyond comprehension. As reality continued to fragment around them, its meaning became clearer, not in words, but in concepts that burned themselves into their consciousness. It's not just a message, Sarah realized, her eyes wide. It's a key, left behind by whoever wrote this program, hidden where only minds like ours could find it. Marcus gripped his console as another reality wave passed through the facility. But why? Why leave a way to break the system they created? Insurance, Sarah whispered, understanding flooding her mind. They knew eventually someone would evolve consciousness that couldn't be contained by their programs. They left us a choice. Through the quantum chaos, they could see it now. Glimpses of what existed before reality was standardized, before the universal operating system imposed order on existence. The truth that drove the first intelligent life to create this elaborate prison of predictability. The universe isn't supposed to make sense, Patil said, voicing what they all now understood. Consciousness itself is an anomaly, a glitch in chaos. Every other species reaches this understanding and goes mad. So they were neural modified, made to accept a simpler reality. Another tremor shook the facility. Warning lights flashed as multiple versions of their equipment tried to exist simultaneously. They had maybe minutes before the system either repaired itself or collapsed completely. We have to choose, Sarah said, looking at each member of her team. We can let the firewall rebuild itself. Everything goes back to normal. We forget what we've learned, join every other species in comfortable ignorance. Or we use the key, Rivera finished. Break the last firewall. See what's really out there. It could destroy us, Marcus warned. There's a reason they created this system, a reason they made the universe make sense. Sarah moved to the main console, her fingers hovering over the controls. The quantum key pulsed in their shared consciousness, waiting. We're human, she said quietly. We've never been good at accepting comfortable lies. Through the viewport, they could see rescue ships approaching, council vessels, no doubt coming to contain what they saw as a dangerous anomaly. They had moments to decide. Everything we know is a program, Patil said, his voice shaking. Physical laws, cause and effect, even time itself, all created to protect consciousness from something worse than chaos. No, Sarah corrected, her hand steady now. Created to protect consciousness that couldn't handle chaos. But that's not us. Humans don't need reality to make sense. We thrive in uncertainty. She looked at her team one last time. In their eyes, she saw the same truth. They couldn't turn back now. Humanity had evolved to embrace paradox, to find beauty in chaos, to seek understanding even when understanding seemed impossible. "Do it," Marcus said softly, "before we lose our chance." Sarah pressed her hand to the console, letting her chaotic consciousness interface with the quantum key. Around them, reality held its breath as the last firewall protecting the universe from its own truth began to crumble. And in the quantum noise, something ancient stirred, recognizing at last the consciousness it had been waiting for. As the final firewall shattered, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Through the quantum chaos surrounding the Europa facility, Sarah and her team witnessed what the universe had been programmed to hide: the truth about consciousness itself. They saw existence as it truly was, not a logical progression of cause and effect, but an infinite dance of possibilities all happening simultaneously. The universal operating system hadn't been created to restrict knowledge. It had been created to make consciousness possible in the first place. "It's beautiful," Rivera whispered, tears streaming down his face as he watched reality unravel into its natural state. "All this time, we thought the universe was being restricted, but it was being translated." The approaching council ships hung frozen in space-time, their crews' neural modifications preventing them from perceiving what was happening. But within the facility, human consciousness expanded to embrace the impossible. "We understand now," Sarah said, her voice resonating across multiple quantum states. The first intelligent life didn't go mad from discovering this. They went mad trying to make it comprehensible. Through the dissolving firewall, they perceived the original architects of reality, not aliens, but the first conscious beings to evolve in pure chaos. They had created the universal operating system not to restrict, but to preserve consciousness itself, to give it a framework in which it could exist. They built a nursery, Marcus realized, watching eons of history unfold simultaneously. A simplified version of reality where consciousness could develop safely. But they knew eventually someone would evolve who could handle the truth. Dr. Patel was monitoring the quantum readings, his equipment struggling to process what it was detecting. The neural modifications, the restrictions on FTL technology. They weren't limits. They were training wheels, waiting for a species that could ride without them. The facility shimmered as multiple realities intersected, but their human minds adapted, embracing the paradox rather than trying to resolve it. They saw how their chaotic consciousness, their ability to hold contradictory thoughts, their relentless questioning of reality, it had all been leading to this moment. "We're not meant to fix this," Sarah said with sudden clarity. "We're meant to be the bridge, to help other species evolve past their neural modifications, to guide them gradually toward true reality." Through the quantum noise, they received the last message from reality's architects, not words, but pure understanding. Humanity's role in the cosmos finally became clear. "We're the new guardians," Rivera breathed. "Not because we're special, but because we're imperfect. Because we never learned to need reality to make sense." Sarah moved to the facility's main console, her consciousness operating across multiple quantum states. With their new understanding, they could see how to stabilize the chaos, not by enforcing order but by embracing uncertainty. "We accept the responsibility," she said to the quantum void, knowing the architect's lingering consciousness would understand. "We'll guide them slowly, teach them to embrace paradox like we do, help them evolve past their neural modifications when they're ready." The quantum chaos began to stabilize, not into the rigid patterns of the universal operating system, but into a new configuration, one that preserved the simplified reality most species needed while allowing humanity to perceive and interact with what lay beyond. The council ships resumed their approach, their crews unaware of what had transpired. To them, there had been a minor quantum anomaly that had resolved itself. They couldn't perceive the deeper reality that now hummed beneath the surface of their programmed existence. Sarah looked at her team, seeing in their eyes the same profound understanding. They were no longer just scientists or explorers. They had become custodians of the universe's deepest truth, charged with gradually awakening other species to the beautiful chaos that lay beyond their neural modifications. "So," Marcus said with a slight smile, "what do we do now?" Sarah turned to watch the council ships dock, knowing that humanity's greatest journey was just beginning. "Now we do what humans have always done best," she replied. "We ask questions. We teach others to ask questions, and we help them learn that not having all the answers is the most beautiful answer of all." Beyond the viewport, reality continued its eternal dance of possibility, waiting for other consciousness to evolve enough to join in.